I'd like to introduce our speaker this evening, David Gray, principal of Brummana High School, the only Quaker institution in Lebanon. He is an international educational leader who has, for over 30 years' experience, instilled high standards throughout his school and inspired the ambitions of the next generation of leaders and managers. He will share a story of hope, of poverty which can be avoided, of dignity which can be conferred, of democratic processes which can be taught. Tonight, he will tell us a story of a land with a divided, conflict-torn past, of a calamitous, perilous, and uncertain present, and of the possibilities of a more prosperous, peaceful, and happier future. Principal Gray is inviting those with whom he meets to be in relationship with the school and to consider how they might help support the students and faculty during the unfolding economic crisis in Lebanon.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for inviting me to talk to you this evening. And I'm delighted to be with you. It's my last presentation in the United States before I go to London tomorrow morning. I want really to inform you as fully as I can about the situation in the beautiful but much tortured country of Lebanon, trapped as it is between Israel and Syria, and which has been the victim of successive invasions, occupations, wars, civil wars, famines, and every other kind of disaster that you can think of, really for thousands of years. Brummana High School is situated 2,500 feet above sea level, overlooking the city of Beirut and the Mediterranean Sea. And behind it tower the Lebanese mountains, particularly Mount Lebanon. If you in the winter time, you can look down on the sparkling Mediterranean Sea and you can look up on the snow-capped mountains. It's a very beautiful place. And in fact, Lebanon is mentioned in the Bible more than any other country in the world, which may surprise you. And Jesus Christ actually preached on the shores of the Mediterranean in modern Sidon, which was Sidon. So it's a country which is steeped in spirituality and religion. Brummana High School plays a very important part in modern Lebanon. It's often described as a beacon of hope on Mount Lebanon for the country on account of the Quaker education it provides, which is very different from the way that most children are schooled in the country. It's one of only 2 Quaker schools in Western Asia or the Middle East, the other being Ramallah on the West Bank, with which you'll be more familiar because of the acuteness of the conflict there between the Israelis and the Palestinians. But I need to tell you about Brummana now because of what has happened in the country. Now, in November 2017, almost exactly 5 years ago, I was getting ready with my wife to sail off into the sunset. I'd been a school principal for 26 years. I was tired. I still had some energy left, but I thought it's enough. And I was at an age where I could retire if I chose to. And so I was going to do what other people do, go and visit places of interest around the world I'd never been to, potter about in my garden, re-meet my wife, because I'd spent so many years working. And then all of a sudden, I was approached completely out of the blue by 2 headhunters who came to me and said, "Would you like to work in Beirut?" Well, of course, I laughed because I said, well, frankly, at this stage of my career, Beirut is the last place in the world I want to go to. I remembered it when I worked in Greece for 7 years as a young man, as a war-torn, devastated place in which people fought constantly over 15 years with each other. It was a kind of reenactment of the Crusades between Christians and Muslims and was extremely dangerous. So being my selfish self, I said, no, of course I don't want to go and work in Beirut. I want to go and have fun. But they kept coming back to me. And eventually I said, all right, I'll put an application in and I'll go out to Beirut and see what it's like. And that decision changed my life. I'll probably never leave Lebanon. I'll spend the rest of my career there, and if I survive that, then I will live there. I feel very attached to the place, and I don't feel that I would be able to walk away from it. It very much reminded me at the start of Greece, a country tortured by other peoples and unable to pull itself out of a combination of corruption and poverty. When I was in Greece as a young man, it inspired me to the extent that I thought I wanted to give my life to young people who needed to have their lives shaped in such a way that they would make the most of their talents and go out into the world genuinely to make a difference to the societies in which they lived. I learned three things in that post-Papadopoulos fascist state of Greece in the 1970s. One, that education alleviates poverty and allows the opportunity for prosperity. Two, that education confers dignity on people who have nothing else in their lives and distinguishes them from the beasts. At least if you're poor but can read and write, if you can do your maths or a science experiment or speak a language, and the Greeks are great, the Lebanese are great linguists, then you can have pride in yourself and you can grow into the kind of individual who can influence things. And the third thing I learned in Greece was that education lays the ground rules for democracy. And that's important because it enables young people to realize that their views matter, that they should articulate those views, that they should listen to others, and that they have a right to play a part in a country that is just and fair. When I went to Lebanon, I realized that these three principles of education were as important there as they were in Greece. Education in Lebanon is the difference between poverty and prosperity. It is the difference between humiliation and dignity. And it is the difference between democracy and autocracy. For those who are educated, they can change things and make the place better. I think I'd like to start now with a video because for about 9 months, the world I lived in Lebanon was relatively normal. Part Arab, part European, part American, a country that didn't quite know what it was. It was a mixture at the Eastern Mediterranean between Asia and Europe. And then there was a revolution. About this time of year in 2019, it was a peaceful revolution. And this is significant because it was led by young people across the religious divides. And Lebanon has 18 religious sects officially and 40 political parties. And there was unity in this peaceful revolution, which broke down the differences and hostilities between religious tribes that have been at loggerheads with each other for a very long time. The government was overthrown. There was an interim government, and there was no government. And then the economic crisis hit, and Lebanese corruption and the lack of capital funding of the state was exposed. There was a run on the banks. Then there were capital controls imposed by the central bank. And suddenly the value of the lira plummeted and has continued to plummet ever since. And that has led to a terrible situation, which is rated as one of the 3 worst economic crises in the world in the last 150 years. The result is, I'll just give you an insight, which we're going to watch now.
For the past several years, Lebanon has been, its currency is close to worthless. This government is fractured and ineffective. There's almost no elected power and there's less security. Lebanese people are suffering. Central correspondent Layla Moana Allen said of this report on a country in collapse.
Abdel Hakim has watched over Lebanon's historic cedars for nearly 2 decades. As a ranger in the country's mountainous north, he considers the trees, the emblem of their flag, many of them hundreds of years old, sacred. But this past winter, they started to disappear. As Lebanon's economic catastrophe escalates, the cost of basic goods like fuel has gone through the roof. The only option now for most to cook and stay warm is firewood. Too expensive to buy, Lebanese are chopping it down themselves.
If you ask anyone around here why they're chopping trees, they'd simply say they don't have money to eat, or their income barely lasts 3 days. No matter how much regulation we enforce, you can't stand in the way of all these people trying to keep their children warm.
As Abdel Hakim takes us deep into the forest to see the destruction firsthand, we come across a man dragging a freshly cut tree down the mountainside with his bare hands. He's a soldier, but can't get by on his army salary. He's too afraid of punishment to speak to us. Felling green or living trees is illegal and could have disastrous environmental consequences. But people here are now so desperate, they're thinking about how to keep their children fed and warm today, not about what comes tomorrow.
These trees are not just mine, but for my children and my children's children, as well as for everyone who lives in this village. If the government is not willing to support the people, we'll say goodbye to all these trees, and 3 or 4 years from now, the only thing you'll be able to see here is rocks.
In the nearest village, we meet a pair of loggers who say they work legally, harvesting wood. But they're not surprised others are resorting to stealing Lebanon's natural bounty.
We don't have employment or wages here. May God replace this failing government. They make you pay mechanical fees, but the roads are still not fixed. We pay our electricity bills, but there's no power. You're paying taxes for something that doesn't exist.
Fuel isn't the only essential that Lebanon can no longer provide for its people. The economy here has collapsed, sending the currency value crashing from 1,500 lira to the dollar to 30,000. Meanwhile, salaries remain unchanged. Everyone who can has left the country, but for those stuck here, this is no longer a crisis situation. This is their new reality. They're now facing a future in which the most basic necessities, power, transport, even food, are luxuries. In May,
Okay, thank you. If we can cut it there.
Mom held an elect.
Thank you very much, Lois. So that gives you a little bit of insight of what's happening in the country, and I want to expand on that. The current state of Lebanon is as follows. 80% of the population are living in poverty, officially. To the extent that last week, the school doctor contacted me and said, we need to talk about cholera. There are now outbreaks of cholera happening around Lebanon on account of the fact that the water is not being treated. Government functions have come to a halt. There is no proper infrastructure in the country. Everything has stopped. 60% of adults in the country are unemployed. And you heard something on the video about the dollar rate. The Lebanese lira is tied to the dollar. When I went there in 2019, it was 1,500 lira to the dollar. When that lady was speaking, she mentioned 30,000 to the dollar. That was 4 months ago. It is now 40,000 lira to the dollar. And we have an annual inflation rate in Lebanon, not of 8% as in the US, but of 210%. That's quite shocking. Things go up in price every day and make living very difficult. The central bank has imposed capital controls so that you can't get your money out. And you can't get your money out because there is no money in the banks or very limited supplies. And when you can get dollars out, it is at about 14% of their value. People have lost their entire life savings as a result of this crisis. And the Lebanese diaspora, of whom there are 16 million, have lost their life savings because many of them invested before 2019, since you could get 10 to 12% interest in the banks. So they wanted to retire to Lebanon, eventually put their money in there, and suddenly it's gone. One or two practical examples of how life has changed. Tomorrow I'm going to London, where I will pick up 37 books from Waterstone's bookshop, which is the biggest book supplier in the UK. I'll pay $450 for them, but that's nothing. I'll put them all in my suitcase, take them back to Beirut, because we can't get books anymore because they're imported and we need them for our educational programs. The supply has dried up because the receivers at the Lebanese end can't afford to pay for the books. When on occasion you do find books for our courses available, they're $100 each. No parents, or very few, can afford this kind of cost. My secretary is a lady called Rula Ashar. She's been the principal secretary for 35 years. She has a daughter called Joanna, who suffers from diabetes, and Joanna has recently had a baby. You can't get the insulin and other drugs that she needs for her diabetes because the pharmacies are empty, because you have to import drugs now and pay for them in dollars, and they're just not available. So what Rula does once a month is she and her husband drive from Lebanon through the mountains and across the border into Syria to Damascus, and from Damascus into Jordan. There she can find the drugs she needs, and on the Sunday she drives back with her husband, either the same way or via the Lebanese side of Israel and the Golan Heights. It's a risky business, but it's very typical of what we have to do in Lebanon today. Life is hazardous, and in order to survive, we have to be versatile and to adapt. My teaching staff, of whom there are 120, were earning $2,000 a month in 2019. Today, they're earning $300 a month. And we can't even afford to pay them that, but we have promised to do so. To feed a family of 2 or 3 is very difficult indeed. And often it's their teachers and their husbands and wives who are going without food so that their children have enough. I've lost 37 staff in the last 12 months. Some of them have gone to work abroad and seek better lives in the Gulf or in Europe or in the United States. But quite a lot of them have just said, I'm not going to work. Because to come to work for a week means that they have to come by car. And a week's fuel in their car is a month's salary. So it's cheaper to stay at home and do nothing. And that's a terrible tragedy. There has been an exodus of skilled people from Lebanon across the professions, medicine, engineering, and teaching. We've lost 4,000 teachers in the last 12 months. And I'm still recruiting for this year. And I'm having people breaking their contracts and leaving at very short notice because they've got their visa to Canada or to the UK or wherever it happens to be. They don't care about being in breach. They just want a life where there's stability and a bit of hope. Last week, I had a science teacher in the lower school who's just been appointed as the head of science, who told me she was going to the UK because she was getting a 50% scholarship for her PhD, which she's currently doing remotely in Lebanon and having to pay for, and she can't afford it. But she hadn't thought things through. I said, well, how are you going to live? She said, I'll live with my sister and her 2 children, husband, with my husband, who's unemployed, and my 2 children. 8 people in a 2-bedroomed apartment in London, one of the most expensive cities in the world to live. She hadn't thought through how she was going to survive. She just grasped this idea that the 50% scholarship would suddenly resolve everything, and it doesn't. And she's gone. This has affected the school in financial terms seriously, and I want to explain to you how. Brummana High School is one of the top 3 or 4 schools in the country. It's survived 150 years. It's known for its stability, its liberal values, and its success in developing thoughtful, reflective, articulate young people who have gone on to become leaders in the Middle East and politics, the professions, and business. Indeed, the last Prime Minister of Lebanon went to Brummana High School, and we've had many presidents as well. The current Sultan of Oman was at Brummana High School. And the reason we produce leaders, I'll explain in a minute. The school has always been reasonably prosperous. We had large numbers of boarders who helped to provide surpluses for us. We now only have 1 because of the situation in the country rather than 100. And we had built up good reserves as well. But we have a big problem now. And the other thing I would say is that we didn't charge the kind of high fees that some of the schools charge in Lebanon. I ought to explain there is no proper state provision in Lebanon in anything, education included. Only 20% of the children in the country have free education in government-run schools, and they are mostly Syrian refugees. The poor Lebanese have to find money in order to have their children educated. So as a Quaker school, we want to have children from all backgrounds and from whether it's racial or cultural or religious, and from all socioeconomic backgrounds. So we has always placed the fees at a level that's affordable for many. And in addition, we always provided financial aid for about 30% of the children at the school. So people from all backgrounds, if they wished, could come and benefit from our kind of education. This year, we put the tuition fees up by 50% in lira and imposed a dollar charge because most of our costs now come in dollars. For example, we need to heat the school in the winter. We're 2,500 feet above sea level. We have snow. In order to heat the school from 6 a.m. to midday each day in the winter and provide electric light through the year, this year will cost us $500,000. And the upshot of all this is that our income from tuition fees and from other sources, such as our summer camp, simply will not match our costs, many of which are charged in dollars or pounds sterling because they're imported goods and services, in order to provide our education programs with the resources we need. The result will be that we will make a loss this year of between $500,000 and $1 million. Now, you might say, well, you can turn to your reserves. You can manage that for a year or 2. Well, we have been managing it. But now our reserves, which were $10 million, are pretty well worthless. They've gone the way of people's life savings. They're trapped in the bank under capital controls. They can only be extracted in small amounts and then at a fraction of their value. So we have nowhere to go. We're in a cul-de-sac. And our financial state is perilous. I need more staff, but I need to be able to pay them a living wage. Many of my staff disappear from school immediately the bell goes in order to take up a second job, maybe as a cleaner to a rich family or doing private tutoring. It's a very desperate situation. You may say, well, why save this school? We need probably to get through the next 2 years, and then if things improve in Lebanon, we'll be okay. But all organizations in Lebanon now are on the verge of bankruptcy. And if they all go bankrupt, there's no country left. And I am particularly concerned about the children who are our hope for the future. Let's have a look at the PowerPoint presentation, if we may. And we'll just flick through it. It'll give you an image of what Brummana High School is like. You'll notice that the motto is I serve. All children at Brummana High School must complete 160 hours of community service in their final 3 years at school. That could be working for the Red Cross, saving lives. It could be tutoring younger children at school who are struggling with academic work. It could be working in the Al-Amal Institute in Brummana for the disabled. In this way, we encourage young people to give of themselves to others, realizing that life is not a selfish exercise, but a communal one. Next slide, please. The school looks magnificent, as you can see. On the left, you'll see a sports pitch, which we laid in 2019, just before the crash. We paid $250,000 for it, and it's now, I'm delighted to say, a very popular focal point for sport in the school. The rest of the school looks great. There's a swimming pool there, built about 50 years ago. I wouldn't venture into it, however, since it's unheated and you might find it a little chilly in the winter time. There are tennis courts and there are many, many school buildings, and they all look great, and they are great. The trouble is, we just can't afford to run the place. And this is the illusion of Lebanon. On the surface, things look normal. But underneath the surface, there's a grinding poverty and gradual deterioration, for which there is no apparent solution at the moment. Next slide, please. Children outside in the sunshine, choosing clubs and activities that they want to participate in, whether it's the I Serve Club or the Model United Nations program or playing volleyball. We believe in a holistic educational philosophy. School is not about passing exams. You need them because they're a passport to the next stage. It's about learning. It's about becoming enlightened. It's about discovering your talents. It's about becoming a whole person. So the extracurricular side of life is just as important as the academic side. Next picture, please. Our founder, Theophilus Waldemar, a Swiss, but he wasn't really the founder in 1873. The founders were really Eli and Sybil Jones, two well-known American Quakers who were in the Middle East in the late 19th century, converting people to Quakerism, one of whom was Theophilus Waldemar. And they also persuaded him to open the school and a hospital as well, to provide healthcare and education for people on Mount Lebanon. I'd like to have met this couple because they must have been very persuasive to persuade Theophilus both to adopt Quakerism and to open a school. Next slide, please. This is an early picture of staff at the school, and you'll notice there are a number of people in the photograph wearing the tarbush, the fez, and this is indicative of the occupiers at the time, who were the Turks, the Ottoman Empire. At all times, Lebanon has been under the yoke of someone or another. Next slide, please. In a way, they've overcome at Brummana those kinds of occupations through Quaker principles. And the Friends Meeting House was established in 1873 in the school, and it's an important feature of our school campus. Next slide, please. This is the Quaker burial ground outside the school in Brummana, where notable Quakers over the last 150 years have been buried. Next slide, please. And the mother tree, a pine tree, 250 years old, which is a symbol of permanence at the school, 100 years older than the school itself. And one of the things the parents love about the school is that solidity, the certainty that their children can come to the school and be educated, and they know that that will be consistent and that their children will emerge well-balanced people at the end if they are well taught and they learn well. Next picture, please. Now, there's a series of pictures now which could be any school in the world. All we're trying to do is to provide education, but it's so vital. Next picture, please. And the next one. The boy on the left is from Yemen. Boarders who come to the school often are from war-torn places. Next one, please. And the next one. Smiling faces. The children love Brummana. It's a safe place where they can say what they like. Next one, please. The main teaching building And the next one. You'll see me teaching in the top left-hand slide there, because I have to teach. I don't have enough staff, so I teach English literature. I love doing it. It's what I trained to do. But I have to do other things as well. And I need more staff. Next one, please. And the next one. The end of the story is the children graduating at the age of 18 and going out into the world. That day is always one that I worry about, because I think, have we done enough to develop them as young people, to fill them with enthusiasm and excitement about the world, and realize it's a privilege to be alive, and that with freedom comes the responsibility to lead your families, your communities, your society, your country. The one on the left is now a teacher at the school, Yarek Tarid. He's only 21, a fresh graduate. We've had to employ fresh graduates and then train them in order to have sufficient staff in the school to run it. Thank you very much, Lois. That's great. So, why should Brummana survive? Well, we have a higher school roll, 1,280, than at any other time in the last 150 years. Parents want their children to be educated by us. They like the Quaker ethos, which focuses and revolves around 4 Quaker values, which all the children know and practice. Individuality. There is a little of God in all of us. We're all different. We allow children to develop according to their talents. So important. And to pursue those talents. Respect. A feature not much recognized in Lebanon, which is divided along tribal lines, 18 official religions, 40 political parties. And they've been at war with each other forever. Tolerance. Tolerance of others' views and beliefs. We have, because we are diverse and because of our values, we have children from all religious backgrounds at the school, all 18 sects, and many of the political parties, and from all socioeconomic backgrounds. 50% of the children are now on financial aid. And the 4th value is peaceful resolution. And my goodness, is that needed in Lebanon. Resolution of local, national, and world problems through debate, through dialogue, through discussion. And it's significant that the Model United Nations programme is our most popular club. We have over 300 students in the upper school involved. And what they do is they hold conferences in which global issues like global warming, for example, are debated and discussed by young people taking the part of other countries. They might be representing Norway or Ethiopia or Bolivia or the United States or the United Kingdom or Australia. And they have to research these countries' views on such subjects and work out what their views would be, and then represent them in often fierce and fair and open debate. This helps them to empathize and to understand the complexities of the world and how it is possible to resolve difficulties through compromise, negotiation, listening, and participating in an articulate, lucid, and respectful way. The school's diversity is unique in Lebanon. Most schools run along doctrinaire religious lines. They do not value free speech. They do not value children having their own opinions. They essentially indoctrinate, and their method of teaching indicates that. They tell the children something, they ask them to learn it, they test them, and the children regurgitate. The end result of the education in most schools is a good grade. But that's it. Our school is about people. It's about human beings. The end of education is the man and the woman, not the grade. I can teach parrots to pass exams. I can't teach them to be humane, thoughtful, reflective, compassionate creatures. But I can teach people to be that. Our approach to education is an analytical one. It's aimed at challenging the spirit of inquiry and developing the critical faculty. because it's through an objective, rational, thoughtful process of the mind that children can make decisions about what their views and ideas are. And it can be applied to any subject. And indeed, it's the way that the adult world works. If you run a business, you don't react on gut instinct or some prejudice you've inherited. You react according to looking at the situation in hand, analyzing it, justifying your ideas through evidence, and making a decision, a business decision on that basis. I want to demonstrate this briefly by reading you something. Now, I said I teach English literature, and I have two classes. They take IGCSEs. We run a Lebanese program in education. We run the International Baccalaureate program, and we run A-levels and IGCSEs. The IGCSEs are taken at the age of 16, and the students I teach are 15. In a year's time, they'll take the exam. I'm teaching them Twelfth Night by Shakespeare, written in 16th century English, and the students speak English as a second language, and that's worth bearing in mind. In the test I set them, which I marked on the plane coming over from Beirut to the US, I asked a series of questions for them to answer. They weren't questions like, what happens on page 22, or can you repeat a speech from Act 1, Scene 2? They were questions asking them to develop informed opinions and justify them. The first question was this: look at Act 1, Scene 2. What is the significance of the shipwreck? Compare the situation and behavior of Viola and Olivia. Support your points with reference to the text. This girl, Romy Muhawij, who's about halfway up, halfway down the class academically, wrote this. In the play Twelfth Night, Shakespeare introduces us to two characters, Viola and Olivia, who are somewhat similar, yet have completely different mindsets. In Act 1, Scene 2, Viola, a rich yet humble woman, is stranded in Illyria with the captain of a boat that has sunk. Viola, having almost lost her brother due to the shipwreck, does not lose hope. This indicates her optimism. In line 11, the captain reassures her that her brother has not drowned. Hang on our driving boat. I saw your brother. Viola thanks him by giving him pure gold, the only thing she had left with her. For saying so, there's gold. This shows us her kind heart and her generosity. In addition, Viola is still willing to serve the Duke Orsino, even after finding out about his feelings towards Olivia. She shows a form of true love towards him, as she does whatever it takes to make him happy, even if it means putting his own happiness before hers. Furthermore, Viola's situation is arguably similar to Olivia, as they both lose their brothers. However, Olivia deals with her situation in an exaggerated manner. She shows irresponsibility as she decides to mourn for her brother for 7 years, while crying every day in private, instead of serving her people and working on her duties as the Countess. The major difference between Olivia and Viola is their behavior towards the loss of their beloved brothers. Viola does not lose hope and still serves those whom she loves, whereas Olivia completely blocks out the world and only focuses on herself and her mourning, which indicates selfishness. People like this will change Lebanon. What's emerging here is a young person who is reflective and thoughtful and who is developing an ethical approach to life. She can see in Twelfth Night two women, both of whom are suffering, but one of whom chooses the route of serving others, whereas the other one serves only herself to the detriment of everyone else. I think it's remarkable that, someone of the age of 15 can recognize this and is able to write in a foreign language so effectively. And when I came over on the plane, I read this, I thought, I must tell people about this. This is the kind of education we're providing. The Minister of Education recently said, Brummana High School and schools like it must survive They are our beacon of hope. They show the way to other places. And we have been turning out leaders, well-balanced, thoughtful, reflective, serving societies in the Middle East for 150 years. But we are now in desperate peril, and we might sink this year. I need your help. I'm 67 years old. I believe I was called by God to come to Lebanon 4 years ago. My wife died earlier this year. It was a terrible blow for me. And I thought to myself, what shall I do? I didn't have to think for very long. This school needs me. It needs my experience. It needs my knowledge. And these children need to be educated so that they can go out into the world and try to provide our people with a juster, fairer, and more peaceful society than the one that their parents have grown up in. I can't walk away. And that's why I shall spend the rest of my life in the country, doing what I can for the young people and for their future. A mother came to see me just before I left for the US. And she came into my office and she went down on her knees and she held her hands together and said, "Mr. Gray, you are our only hope." And I said, "Please, get up. Don't kneel to me. You're wrong. Your children are our only hope. And it is our duty, you and me, to invest in their future because they will lead us out of the trouble we find ourselves in today." And that is what I am about. And that's why I'm here in America now. I need your help. Whatever you can do, whatever you can give, whoever you can tell, spread the word about Lebanon. This is a jewel at the end of the Mediterranean. It sparkles in the sunlight. But it is terribly, terribly suppressed by circumstances now. I don't think I've got anything else to say, really, except I'm grateful for your patient listening to what I've had to say. And I hope I didn't speak for too long. Brummana High School matters a lot to me, and I cannot bear the thought that it might just cease to exist. It's doing a great job. The school is full. People want it. But circumstances beyond our control have put it at risk. I'm raising funds really particularly to pay the teachers a decent wage so that they'll stay, so that they'll manage, so that they'll have a comfortable life and be happy with us. And for the children whose parents can't afford to keep them at the school and where we don't have sufficient funds to fully provide with financial aid the help that they need. You know, I could have walked away a long time ago. I'm well off. You know, I don't have the need to do this. And yet I absolutely have the need to do it. It's not about material things. It's about humanity. And I have a debt to pay. Thank you for listening.
Where did you teach before? Can you give some sort of, I mean, you said you were in Greece, but...
Yeah, I started life, I taught in Bristol in the south of England for a couple of years, and then I went to Greece because the UK at the time was going through a kind of slump. Life seemed a bit meaningless. I suppose I was a young person, and I had a chance to go to Greece. I went there. The dictatorship had fallen. The country was being opened up, and that's really where I learned about the value of education. I was there for 7 years. Then I went full of, I don't know, I suppose it was anger in my belly about how casual and casually affluent the British were, who didn't really appreciate the education and all the privileges they had of education. Whereas I'd seen people who had nothing, desperate for education, The worst thing you could do in Greece was turn a child out of a class because they were late. I've seen 17-year-olds weeping outside classes because they weren't admitted to the lesson. Whereas what I saw in Britain was people running away from the classes. And so I went back to Britain, and I was determined to enlighten young people as to the preciousness of their lives and how much they could do with life, if only they were awake to its possibilities. So I spent the next 30 years doing just that. I taught in London, in Leeds, and then I became a headmaster in East Yorkshire for 8 years. And then I went to schools in Edinburgh in Scotland, which had a population of over 3,000 students. And they were the biggest independent schools in Europe. And I was there for 18 years. But at the end, although I did feel I'd done something very worthwhile, because working with any young people is worthwhile, I suppose there was an area of me that wasn't fully fulfilled, and that I felt, I know this sounds very Calvinist really, that I needed to have a harder life, wear the hair shirt. But I am glad that I've gone to Lebanon, because every day I can make a difference to young people's lives. And it's very humbling to see them flourish and go out eventually and do good work. You know, that's what it's about for me.
I was wondering if the crisis, you hear over the many years that various troubles in Lebanon.
Mm-hmm.
Is the origin of this crisis a repetition of something similar that's happened in the past, or is this something unique to Lebanon?
I think that's a really good question. I think that the origin of this crisis, which is an economic crisis, is in the solution they found to end the civil war in 1990. Because basically what they did was they created a straitjacket for the country by saying, okay, the easiest way to stop the civil war is to give everyone a share of power. So it doesn't matter what happens in an election. Each of the political parties and the religious sects are represented in the parliament, which means that, you know, if you look at America, you've got the Republicans and the Democrats. So if the Democrats are in power, which they are now, in the Senate and the House of Representatives, well, you know, you've got a strong opposition who can question, who can hold them to account, and the other way around. In Lebanon, that can't happen because we've got so many people in power that what happens is you get enclaves of power in ministries, and that leads to corruption. The education ministry, which is controlled by Hezbollah and the Shias, is full of people who belong to that party and who favor their own people in decisions to do with education. The same is true of the economics ministry. So you never get any progress. There's massive corruption. Let me give you an example. You know, you might have a situation where, let's say, there's an issue to do with the school campus. And you think, how are we going to resolve this? We've lost the deeds for part of the campus. How do we prove it's ours? Well, there's a legal process, or, well, there's a business of going to the ministry and seeing what deal can be done. So, you know, we're not living in a meritocracy which enables people to vote for the parties that they want and get the government that they want. It's a fixed, rigid system which doesn't allow that. So in the recent elections, there were 13 independent members of parliament elected who want change, who want a secular state, who don't want a theocracy. But the vast majority of people, because of the nature of Lebanon, vote for their religion, or they vote for their political party of the past. It's tribal. It's beginning to change. I mean, the fact that there are 13 independent MPs is hopeful. And there is hope on the horizon in the sense that only last week, the Lebanese and Israelis agreed about the division of the extraction of gas from the Mediterranean Sea. Now, the Lebanese don't agree with Israel about anything. They have never recognized the state of Israel. But actually, the fact that they've reached an agreement is a good thing, because once they extract gas, they can sell it off to the Europeans. It will be a sign that the economy is rising again. And it may be the beginnings of a wider peace in the Middle East. The Middle East is changing. So I'm not full of gloom, other than for the next couple of years. I think things will be restored. And once the economy rises a bit, the Lebanese diaspora will begin investing in the country again. But they've got to have the confidence that the old, what we call la classe dirigeante, have been cleared out or have been cleansed and actually are accountable to the people, which is what the IMF are insisting on before they invest in the country. Does that explain it?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Okay.
So how are people eating?
Well, the Lebanon is pretty self-sufficient in terms of food, in terms of fruit and vegetables. The Lebanese diet's very healthy. It's fruit and vegetable based. It's a Mediterranean diet. And the Bekaa Valley is a fertile plain between two ranges of mountains from which fresh food comes. Now, they don't have the resources anymore maybe to buy meat. So most people have to eat vegetarian, but that's not an unhealthy thing. However, you know, I know of families at school, teaching families where, well, they're growing vegetables in their little plot of land next to their house now. They're picking fruit off the trees. But, you know, one of the things that I find very disturbing is that poverty does not speak its name. It's a private thing. It's to do with pride. People don't want to admit that they have nothing and they have to beg. A few months ago, one of the guards at the school, a man of about 50, I suppose, married late in life, and his wife was going to have a baby. And I was crossing the school campus in the evening, and he went down on his knees to me and he begged me for help, for money, because he didn't have the wherewithal for this child to be born and for him to be able to bring her up, because he was earning so little money. And of course I helped him. And we have to do these things. You help who you can because nobody else is going to, the government doesn't. Same with people in hospital. The social security, which is kind of health insurance, which you pay for in lira, is now worthless. So instead of covering 90% of medical costs, it only covers 10%. And that means maybe you don't go to the hospital. That means people die unnecessarily or younger. Or if they do go to the hospital, we get them out. We pay for them. We find ways, gathering together, going to contacts we've got to pay their hospital bills, which are exorbitant. I mean, it's very difficult. But most of the time, what you notice is just a general decline into degradation. Ask a Lebanese to smile. They'll do it readily enough, but what you immediately notice is they don't have dental treatment because it falls down the list of priorities. You're not going to die if you are missing a few teeth. So what money they have, they've got to prioritize and invest in what matters most. Some parents go hungry so that their children can eat.
What's happening to the healthcare infrastructure? Is that degrading now?
Yeah, absolutely, because the country has lost a lot of doctors and nurses. So the quality of the treatment you get is poorer than it was. But I mean, the top hospitals are very good. If you can afford it, the very rich are well treated. But everyone else used to be reasonably treated, but they're not now because they haven't the money to cover the costs. So what you do is you might say, I mean, the Lebanese families are extended families. And the tradition is that your family, your tribe is the wrong word, but your kin will always help you. So lots of Lebanese have relations abroad in the States or in Canada or wherever. And, you know, if you've got a problem, a health problem, you can't afford to go to the doctor. So you phone your second cousin who's a doctor, and he'll give you a bit of informal advice over the phone. You avoid going to have your health treated because it's costly. So you find other ways around it. The Lebanese are very adaptable in that way. They're very versatile. They find ways around problems. But, you know, there's a saying in Lebanon that the country is like a cork in water. It's always unstable, but always afloat. And the Lebanese themselves are resilient. They're like a boxer on the ropes. They absorb the punishment and they survive. But in the end, they're damaged and nothing changes. And that's a problem.
Is there any risk of war?
I don't think so. I don't think there's any appetite for war because, well, I mean, the most obvious opponents for war would be Israel, because the Israelis have invaded Lebanon on numerous occasions and do so every 3 or 4 years for various reasons, usually to do with Hezbollah, which is a political party in Lebanon, but outside Lebanon is considered a terrorist organization by many countries. But the Israelis have no appetite for war. Israel wants peace. The Israelis have done deals with Middle Eastern states, the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia. They want to trade, they want commerce. And they're also a divided country themselves. I mean, they have had repeated elections. So the Israelis don't want trouble. So I don't really think it's likely. People talk about it from time to time, but I don't think so. And, you know, Syria is in no state to wage war against Lebanon and has no interest in doing so. There's always a danger of terrorist activity. That's always a danger in a country like Lebanon. But actually, you'd be surprised if you lived there. It's a very peaceful place in many respects. Crime rate is much lower in Beirut than it is in where I am now in Cleveland, or in Philadelphia for that matter. People are tired, you know, they're exhausted by what they've gone through. They don't really want trouble. They want peace. And the political leaders are in the same situation. They don't want trouble. So I don't think that's a major risk.
That's good. That's very good. Yeah.
I mean, the problem really is just the collapse, the economic collapse, where no one is able to do anything. And the danger for schools like ours is we simply go bankrupt and we can't survive because we have no reserves to draw on. We can't pay our overheads. We can't bring in enough income to meet those overheads. And that's why I'm traveling around the world asking for help. However you can help us. Anything is welcomed.
What about textbooks? Could we gather textbooks for you?
Yeah, you could do. And we have a school in Luxembourg that's helping us with that, actually, St. George's in Luxembourg, where the head happens to be very sympathetic to the kind of turbulence that is in the Middle East. He's studied Middle Eastern affairs at university. So they raise funds for us with the children. And they've recently sent us a consignment of 200 books that we need. So that is one way. I mean, there are lots of ways people can help. Schools do fundraisers, you know, sponsored walks and things like that. And all of these things help in a small way to keep the school going.
So you have like lists of textbooks or something that people could donate? Or?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we do.
Maybe we can get that then.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. I mean, if you email me, Principal, Principal, Principal at bhs.edu.lb, or that's it, or David.Gray, Gray, and the same ending at bhs.edu.lb. So anyway, if anyone wants to ask any other questions or make comments, I'm happy to answer.
The Cedars of Lebanon. That's what I think of Lebanon.
Yeah. And that's why I played the video at the start.
Yes.
Maybe actually we can finish, if you wouldn't mind, Lois, with the 2 testimonials, one from a student and one from a teacher. They'll take about 3 or 4 minutes total. Would you like to hear those?
Yes. Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, if you could play those, Lois, that would be great.
17-year-old kids starting at a new school in a new country, but VHS community made it really easy for me to adapt, and I made some good friends. Towards my last year of high school, my family started struggling to pay the tuition fee since we had left everything behind in Syria and we had no proper income. But I was lucky enough to receive this financial support from VHS, and I was able to complete my studies. I then got my bachelor's degree in psychology from a university in Istanbul, Turkey. And I'm currently working for a UN organization called the International Organization for Migration. I'm very grateful to have received financial support from VHS, and I'm proud to say that VHS has truly become an important part of my life journey. And I would like to say financial support does not only help the students and their families financially, but also gives them hope to continue their education and fulfill their dreams. So, thank you.
That was Ezra Hamami, a Syrian refugee whom we helped through her school career and who is now successfully working for the United Nations and making a difference. And finally, we'll see Lisette Haj, who's the head of English, talking about her perspective as a teacher at the school.
Hello, I speak to you today as a fellow teacher from Brummana High School, a school in Lebanon. It is one of the oldest institutions that has weathered the storm and been through a lot. Since 2019, since the economic collapse in this country, people have been struggling a lot, and they have been facing a lot of issues, especially with capital control, the devaluation of the local currency, and the massive immigration of brains in Lebanon. Obviously, teachers have been affected as well. Today, we struggle to make ends meet, and we try our best not to compromise the standard. We do not find any shame in seeking help, and we hang on to our values, to our Quaker values, and we continue to persevere to work according to the school motto, I serve. However, with all of the issues that we are facing, it has become really hard, and we almost work for no. Therefore, as a teacher, I would find it really important that we all work together and seek the best opportunities to support one another. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Lois. So that really concludes what I've got to say. It's about teachers and students, and it's about keeping the school going. Am I being able to support both those wings of the school, at least over the next year or two, till we come out of this slump that the country is in? Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, and safe travels.
Thank you very much indeed. I've had a lovely time in the US. Everyone I've met has been warm and welcoming and compassionate. And it's given me the courage I need to go back to Lebanon and to continue doing what I do, which is such important work for the generations that will succeed me. And I hope make Lebanon a more peaceful and happier and fairer place. Thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure to talk to you tonight.
Safe home, David.
Thank
you.
Thank you very
for
much. Thank
shining
you.
a light on what sounds like a beautiful place, but at least for me, was much darker until I heard from you. And please keep in touch.
I shall. And please feel free to email me anytime, if any of you want to. And I don't mean just for purpose of donations. I mean, if you want to chat, if you want to, find out how the school is going, or if you've got any bright ideas, I'm sure you have, then I'm delighted to hear from you.
Fantastic. Thank you so
much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.